Socialism and communism are about one thing only: power for the ruling class. It's the wrecker of nations and destroyer of societies. America will never be a socialist country. We must always be skeptical of those who want conformity and control.
That was Trump in 2019 during his first administration, warning conservatives about Venezuela, about socialism, about the creeping hand of government control. But now,
Big Pharma will either abide by this principle voluntarily or will use the power of the federal government to ensure that we are paying the same price as other countries.
I guess so much for being skeptical of those who want conformity and control, right? This same guy sounds more and more like self-proclaimed democratic socialist Bernie Sanders. So let's talk about that. Not just the hypocrisy, but what socialism actually is, and why Trump's current platform includes the kinds of policies conservatives used to attack Bernie for, and what it says about the right if we're now embracing socialism as long as it's wearing a red hat. I think we should start by defining socialism. Unfortunately, Republicans have labeled everything they don't like as socialism, going back to over Obamacare, student loan forgiveness, libraries, yeah. And progressives similarly label any government program that people generally like as socialism, like they label fire departments and roads as socialism. Neither one of those things are socialism, okay? Both sides are wrong. Socialism at its core is about government ownership or direct control of the means of production. Not just regulation, not just redistribution, but the state running the show to some degree. In full-blown socialist systems like the former Soviet Union or present-day Cuba, the government owns factories and farms and utilities. You could take Venezuela, for example, which is the country Trump was talking about in that first clip. Venezuela is rich in resources, oil specifically, so much so that in the 1950s, it was the fourth wealthiest country in the world. Fast forward to a charismatic leader in Hugo Chavez promising the nation that government was the solution to all of their problems. Does that sound familiar?
I will act with historic speed and strength and fix every single crisis facing our country. We have to do it.
The Venezuelan government slowly seized control of private companies and price-fixed essential goods in the 90s and 2000s, which led to massive shortages and economic collapse when the price of oil fell. That's an oversimplification of what happened in Venezuela, obviously, and you can learn more about what happened in that country in this video up here. But my point is that socialism is the government controlling and overtaking the means of production, doing things like setting prices or eliminating competition from the marketplace. And those are things that both Bernie and Donald are for now. Bernie wanted the government to be in charge of healthcare, and Trump now wants to control the prices of pharmaceuticals, which we'll get to in a second. Bernie wanted to protect American workers with trade limits, and Trump wants to protect American workers with tariffs and trade limits. Trump, alone at the top of the executive branch, has threatened businesses that outsource jobs. He's started and then stopped and then started and then escalated and then paused. I really can't keep track of how many times at this point. A trade war with the entire world with tariffs. And it should be settled at this point that this kind of socialism doesn't work. Central planning by the state has never led to prosperity. There are no examples of it. But it turns out that most of the right doesn't actually believe that that's true, even though they've been saying it for decades. It's not so much that the state can't be smarter than the billions of inputs that go into markets and prices. They just think that Democrats can't. But all-knowing and all-powerful Trump, he can definitely do this. And that's where I just totally disagree. I think the government cannot do this. I don't think technocrats can do it. I certainly don't think one person at the top of the executive branch can do this. One trick that Bernie and Trump, and to some degree both parties, are doing currently is they call their policies nationalism instead of socialism. It's just wordplay, though, because there's not really a difference. As Jonah Goldberg points out, this is because socialism, like nationalism, has the same core logic. Any hindrance to the good of the collective, the people, the nation, is illegitimate, and therefore, for the good of the people, the state must have control of the means of production and the distribution of the product to ensure that all people benefit. The distinction between socialism and nationalism on the ground is about marketing, not principle. Socialized medicine is nationalized healthcare. They're saying the same thing there. So now we have a Republican Party that is cheering on protectionist tariffs and price controls in the name of nationalism. Here's Trump talking about the U.S. economy as a department store where he gets to set prices in his Time magazine article. It's a giant, beautiful store, and everybody wants to go shopping there. And on behalf of the American people, I own the store, and I set the prices. And I'll say, if you want to shop here, this is what you have to pay. That is at least as stupid as Obama's insistence to businesses that you didn't build that. The U.S. economy is not owned by the state, and certainly not by one guy at the top of the executive branch. And inevitably, when socialist policies like protectionist tariffs fail, because they always do, socialists are going to tell you that high prices and shortages are good because maybe the state thinks you have enough already. And that's exactly what Donald Trump is doing and Bernie Sanders. Here's Bernie Sanders talking about deodorant like that.
At the end of the day, you don't necessarily need a choice of 23 underarm spray deodorants or 18 different pairs of sneakers when children are hungry in this country.
And here's Trump talking about dolls and pencils.
Much of it we don't need. You know, somebody said, oh, the shelves are going to be open. Well, maybe the children will have 2 dolls instead of 30 dolls, you know. And maybe the 2 dolls will cost a couple of bucks more than they would normally. But
see, the state knows your underarm hygiene needs better than you do. Trust me. They just do. Trump will decide what toys your child gets for Christmas because you can't be trusted to do so. And if people don't like these higher prices, well, why don't we try controlling those prices from the government level? I would love you to think back just a few months to the 2024 campaign and remember how hard we all hammered Kamala Harris for thinking she could implement price controls on grocery stores. Well, here's Trump this week signing an executive order on price controls for pharmaceuticals. Apparently, if you do it in a red hat, it's very smart policy.
And we'll no longer tolerate profiteering and price gouging from Big Pharma, but
via Cato, which is a libertarian think tank, President Trump ordered the Department of Health and Human Services to communicate price targets to pharmaceutical manufacturers. Trump does not in any way suggest those price targets would apply only to the prices the government pays for medicines. If HHS determines that pharmaceutical manufacturers have failed to make significant progress, whatever that means, toward those targets, things get ugly. In that event, Trump commands that the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission shall undertake enforcement action against any anti-competitive practices, that the Commerce Department and other agencies shall consider all necessary action regarding the export of pharmaceutical drugs or precursor material. The Food and Drug Administration shall review and potentially modify or revoke approvals granted for drugs. And all federal agencies shall take all action available to address global freeloading and price discrimination against American patients. See, here's the thing. Health and Human Services has no authority to set prices for consumer products. None at all. But all those agencies combined, HHS, DOJ, FTC, FDA, Commerce Department, they all have the ability to punish companies that don't get in line with what the White House wants. When we give the federal government broad powers to regulate industries, there's always a possibility those powers are going to be weaponized. That's what's happening here. Maybe the FDA won't approve pharma companies' future drugs that they want to take to market if they don't hit the prices. Maybe if you don't like and subscribe to this channel, I will try to ruin your business. No, that's not really what I'm going to do. I'm just kidding. So here's what I would like you to do. If you have ever complained about Bernie or AOC's socialism from the right, maybe take a look at Trump with a little more skepticism. Are you really against the state trying and failing to pull the levers of the economy, or are you only against it if your side isn't the one doing so?